Welcome to Tales She Told Me, a podcast featuring honest conversation about what it means to be a woman, a mother, and in business. I'm your host, Farrah Haidar. Today, we will be discussing food and body issues, and joining me is Julia Brooks. Julia is a nutritionist, NLP practitioner, highly sought after weight loss coach, and the creator of Permanent Weight Loss Academy. She specializes in helping overachieving women go from overweight and frustrated from years of yo-yo dieting to ditching the dead-end diets and achieving permanent weight loss so that they can finally put their weight loss struggle behind them, walk around with crazy amounts of confidence, and never be too tired for the ones they love. Julia, thank you for being here. I'm also going to admit that Julia has coached me, so I know she's fabulous, and that's why I wanted to talk to her. I have to tell you, as you know, this is a big topic for me, right? I have struggled with weight and body issues for a large portion of my life, and I can't wait to dig a little deeper on this stuff with you. So you've helped a lot of women, as we've seen. You've helped me not just lose weight, but reconcile their relationship with food, which is different, right? So what is a recurring theme you hear from women?
Thank you so much for having me, Farrah, and I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about this topic as well, of course. The recurring theme that I hear from women is, what I like to call the diet flywheel. And we go from a place where we restrict. And so we go on a restriction diet, whether we want to lose weight or we feel guilty or whatever it might be. And the restriction leads to a natural biological process in our body that leads to us binging, right? Because little do we know, we're telling the environment there's no food around. And so it causes a biological response that makes us want to literally eat everything in sight and everything in high calorie form. And so we go on this binge, and then afterwards we feel guilty, and then we restrict, and the flywheel just continues and it gains momentum. And so the most recurring theme that I hear from women is, I don't know why I can't stop binging. And that they've just done these restrictive diets over and over and over again. And it's a pattern that I've seen over and over again for years. And as you know, Farah, that I've lost 75 pounds on my own. So I was on the flywheel for a very long time as well, over a decade to be exact. And it's just something that is just kind of a side effect of having weight issues.
You know, one of the things I really enjoyed about your coaching was how you integrated the science into it. I mean, one thing about being on the flywheel is I think a lot of women think, well, if I was just more disciplined enough, right? I'm the problem. And I lived with that for a long time. And it really struck me that day, like I'm a super disciplined person. It wasn't about discipline. So hearing you sometimes talk about the biology of it really, really resonated with me. Could you share with us like a couple of things about the biology of it to enlighten our listeners?
Absolutely. And, just to kind of, top off what you said, it's funny when you say you're a really disciplined person because a lot of us are. But how disciplined would you be if you were in a desert and you had no water and there was a bottle of water in front of you? You
Mhm.
can't, no matter how disciplined you are, you can't be more disciplined than Mother Nature. Mother Nature will always win. Right. And so, the biological aspect is really simple. You have a reptilian brain. We've been here for, scientists argue with how long we've been around, but you have a million year old brain essentially. And even though we have things like cars and cities and we can talk through the Zoomiverse and do all of these
Mhm.
things, our brains haven't changed much over the years. And so our brains are still living in a place of where your reptilian brain wants to do two things. It wants to survive and it wants to procreate. And so when there's no food in the environment, or where you can go on a restrictive diet, or, a diet where you're restricting your food intake, where you're not listening to your hunger cues and you're ignoring them, what you're doing is you're telling your body and your brain, hey, there's no food in the environment and we're in a famine, which used to happen, way back in the day all the time, where we would go into famines and we'd have to live off of our own body fat for several months or weeks. And so Then what happens is you go off of this diet, right? And you go to, I don't know, Thanksgiving dinner, and all of a sudden there's all this food in the environment, and your brain literally turns on and says, "Oh, we're not in a famine anymore. We're now in a feast mode," right? And what it
Mhm.
does is it'll actually turn your hunger hormone on as you start to eat the food. So I don't know if you've ever been what I like to call, a runaway train, or when you can't stop eating. You have a plate of food in front of you and you're like, I'm so full, but I can't stop. This is your hunger hormones literally turning on as you're eating so that you'll eat in excess of sometimes 4 to 5,000 calories a day in excess, just because your brain is preparing for that next famine.
Oh, wow. I know. I definitely have been there. And it's tough because you feel like you're fighting Mother Nature, and Mother Nature is going to win, right? So if there was one thing you could change about how we view food or how we think about food, what would it be?
That's a really, really great question. There's a lot, but if I could pick one, I think the way that we look at a plate of food. I think that we as a society, and especially as women, we look at a plate of food and we think, is this going to make me bigger or is this going to make me smaller? I know specifically for me, I was obsessed with counting calories and for years. And so I would be able to look at a plate of food and know how many calories were in it. And so the shift that I would love to see would be for us to, instead of think of, is this going to make me bigger or smaller? How is this going to make me look? If we could shift into, how is this going to make me feel? How much energy is this going to give me? It's so funny. I remember I actually used to be so obsessed with calorie counting that I used to bring my measuring cups with me and my food scale in my purse. And I was in Pasadena, California one time. I was going out with my best friend Kate that I never really got to see, and we were sitting down having sashimi. And I kid you not, I pulled my food scale out of my purse and I weighed out my sashimi, and then I put it back on my plate. And my friend is sitting there. She's so happy to see me. Everybody's probably like, what is this crazy woman doing? And I look back and I was more focused on the sashimi than my friend, and then spending time with her. And same thing with Paul. Like, he loves to cook for me, and there were so many years where I would stand over him like a tyrant, going, make sure you only use 1/4 cup of this, or even like my favorite, when he would put a heaping cup of rice in, and I'd come over and level it off because it couldn't be heaping, it had to be leveled. And so I just think that if we as a society and as women could move and shift into looking at a plate of food and going, hey, how is this going to make me feel? What energy is this going to give me? This is going to hydrate and fuel my cells in my body. And if we could look at food like that, that's the shift that I would love to see.
Yeah, and it's an important one. My I you kind of caught me at the tail end of my journey, not the tail end, or at least in a better place than I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And like you, I had the remnants of every diet I've ever been on. Like, bananas 2 points. Hello, Weight Watchers. This is 4 grams. Like, oh, the fist rule, and like all those well-intentioned, let me put it this way, I'm not banging at diets, well-intentioned diets that come out there. And I literally, when I saw food, I wouldn't see food, I wouldn't see nutrition, I'd see whatever remnant of, some diet that I remembered or whatever philosophy I was on that week. And it took a long time. It took me actually removing, I think, all restrictions on everything and just going back to viewing food as food. I can't get rid of the banana as 2 points though, for some reason. Every time I see a banana, I can't get rid of it. But it took it, and that was like, and I gained a ton of weight at that point, you know. But I gained a ton of weight in like the first 3 months, and then the next 6 months I stabilized. And I found that so interesting because I actually, when I removed the restrictions, it became I don't know, less obsessive, right? I don't know what happened, but it was finally I was able to change how I related to food. I don't know if that's common, if you see that in a lot of people or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I hear this quite a bit actually, right? So, if you were to take the explanation that I just gave you and you were to plug it into what happened to you, right? You were restricting and then you said I'm not going to restrict. And so clearly your brain went into feast mode. And so you gained a little weight, which that's what your body is designed to do for you. So kudos, your body's working well. But there was a point where after feasting and feasting and feasting, your brain went, wait a second, there's tons of food in the environment. I don't need to do this any longer. And it stabilized. And then you
Mhm.
started to go back into a calorie maintenance, so to speak, automatically. And that's why you stopped gaining the weight.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's so much information out there, right? And there's so much conflicting advice. This is one of the things that I really got frustrated with at the end. Carbs are good for you, carbs are bad for you. More protein, less protein. Don't eat chia seeds, do eat chia seeds. It's like there's so much conflicting information, and I'm really interested because you became a student, right? When you decided to lose the weight I'm not going to say lose the weight anymore, reconcile your relationship with food, you became a student. And I'm really curious about, you know, what process you took and what you discovered along your journey.
Yeah, I actually became a mad scientist, I would call it. I was like, in the throw of it, working hard, and the first thing that I did when I said I'm going to find a permanent solution is I know this sounds so simple, but I made the decision. I made the decision that I will find away. And that decision carried me through all of my failures because there were failures. It's not like I said, I'm going to make this decision to figure this out. And then the next day I took a magic pill and I figured it out. I failed and I fell along the way. And there were a lot of things that didn't work, but eventually I stumbled into what did. And so that was my journey, just making that decision and then using common sense as I was experimenting and as I was trying things because, you know, I think that if we go into our common sense corner, we could safely say that when we were, living off of the land 5,000 years ago, we probably weren't looking at bananas as 2 points. We were probably looking at bananas as, oh my gosh, like, I mean, think about it. It's so funny. I have a very good friend of mine, and she has a baby, and she made a comment a few months back and she said I would never feed my baby a banana because there's so many carbs in it. And
Mhm.
while I'm a coach, in my career, I'm not a coach to my friends, it's not really my place. So I didn't say anything, but I mean, bananas, they just grow on they're eye level to a human being and they give us everything that we need. Every nutrient that we need is really in a banana to have energy and to feel good. And there's so much potassium in it. And so just using that common sense moving forward of, hey, does this actually make sense? Would this make sense in nature? And is this designed for my body? And then listening to my body and changing my relationship with food as well because you could get the perfect diet. I mean, God could come down himself and say, this is how you're designed to eat and give you the diet. But, we've got to remove the blocks and the coping mechanisms, and we've got to learn to process our emotions and not reach for food instead. And once I did that, the whole world changed for me. And so there's a lot of dynamics to it, but that is kind of bundled into one paragraph.
Big package. Yeah. Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was kind of where I wanted to go next, which is we've talked a little bit about the science. And, we're not here to give anyone the diet or anything like that, a diet or anything like that. We're just saying, eat sensibly. But the emotional part of it also, I think, is huge. And I think so many people lose weight. I used to call myself like a professional weight loser. Like I could lose any amount of weight with enough time, right? Um, but whether keeping it off was the problem. And I've seen these huge fluctuations in my life. And I think that is definitely back to emotional stuff. So, do you find commonalities in the emotional part of it, or is it every story is unique? Like, what have you discovered about the emotional side of it?
Yeah, I every story is unique and it's also the same in many ways. Society has kind of brainwashed us since childhood to want to look a certain way and to want to feel a certain way. And if we look a certain way, then then we can be beautiful and we can be accepted and we can be loved. And so I think there's a tendency of when we don't look a certain way to go, oh my gosh, am I going to be loved? Am I going to be accepted? And so there's all of that. And could you repeat the question again so I can elaborate?
No
Sorry.
problem. No, I was just saying, do you see commonalities in the emotional aspect of things, or what have you learned about the emotional aspect of things during your own, your own journey as well as helping others?
Yes. So, and so sorry, I just wanted
No,
you to repeat it really quickly so I make sure that I am talking about the right point.
no
um,
problem. Yeah.
so yeah, so definitely I think that that comes into play, the emotional aspect of wanting to be a certain way, but I also feel like as a society we are trained that if we could just, you know, uh have a certain car or feel a certain way or have a certain donut after dinner that we can feel better. And I think that we also learn as a society to kind of shove things down. As women, when we grow up, right, we have to keep our legs crossed. We have to sit pretty. We have to sit up straight. We have to be a certain way. And so, screaming out because you're angry or having some sort of emotional release isn't accepted in our society. And yet, people have been doing that for forever.
Hmm.
People have been angry in the woods and hitting trees forever. And the idea that we need to shove things down is the issue here, because what it does is it causes us to reach for something in order to suppress that emotion. And
Yeah.
so I see that time and time again.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like during my journey, one of the things and I'm still uncovering a lot of stuff, as you know. But one of the things I uncovered was my weight served a purpose, right? And the first purpose, I grew up in a very patriarchal society in Beirut. Like I love watching little kids, by the way, when they're moving and stuff because they're so unconscious of all of it. It's such a joy, and it reminds you of that, all the ideas you have about your body have really been put there or are a reaction to something. They're not, you weren't born with them. You weren't born thinking you look a certain way. But anyways, going back to my original point, I grew up in a very patriarchal society, and for me, being fat was protection. It made me invisible, and I kind of like that. It made me especially invisible to the male gaze, which I've heard a couple of women say that. Like if they went, well, some women went through sexual abuse or something like that, they would gain weight because it made them invisible, and that was a good thing. And until I think you discover what this way, it was also my way of rebelling against the standards that were trying to be put on me, but that's another one. um I think if you don't figure out what you're getting from it, then you're always going to get it from it. And one thing that you said, and I would love it if you could elaborate on this. One thing I heard you say was it's okay to seek comfort, right? That's one of the things you said, and I'd love if you could elaborate a little bit on how you came to that and how you use it in your coaching to help women kind of reconcile this relationship.
You hit it right on the head, Farah. Weight loss is 80% psychology and 20% weight loss. And I think that we mostly focus on the mechanics. What's the diet I'm going to do? And this is why we struggle so much. This is why I struggled for over a decade. And so, just to elaborate on seeking comfort, you are a human being with emotions, and we're designed to feel these emotions and to live our lives. And so I think that, when's the last time that you felt sad and you didn't feel like it was wrong or you were doing something wrong, or, why am I sad? And I think that when we fight these emotions and we get upset because we're sad, right? Now we're just stacking on these emotions opposed to just going through the day and saying, hey, you know what? I woke up, I had a dream about someone I lost last night, and I feel really sad this morning, and that's okay. I'm going to honor
Mm,
this emotion, and I'm going to move through my day with this emotion, and I'm going to let it pass. And
yeah.
that's what we're going for, because you don't want to shove it down because, and I could go even deeper into this, your emotions actually get stored into your fat cells. And so as you're releasing fat, you might experience these emotions again. In the way that I found how to seek comfort. I grew up in a small town I'm just a hillbilly from Michigan. I grew up in a small town,
Yeah.
and we all suppressed our feelings. We never talked about emotions in my family.
Mm.
It wasn't until I actually had a loss. I lost my dog and my precious baby a few years ago, and I needed to move through the emotions. And I had been working with emotional work before that, but it was through that allowed me to really work on processing through my emotions. And I started with practices, and I teach my clients practices that can help them move through these situations without just shoving these emotions down and storing them.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think our society is not set up for emotional release. No, our schedules are not set up for emotional release. Our, I do think this new generation coming up is going to change that because they're not agreeing to abide by, we kind of, I'm sure this was similar for you, but me growing up, like you weren't allowed to have feelings about certain things, right? Like it was just like, oh, you don't like school? Too bad. Buck up, do it. Like that was it. There was no like, oh, like, oh, I'm really anxious about this. These kids are talking more and more about it. So we might be seeing a shift. Sometimes it's very hard for me, I have to admit, as a parent, to not be like, hey, can you please just, get yourself together and move, like, let's go. Right. And so I agree with you. Our society is not set up for these emotions. Do you have any idea, like any tips on how to create that space for yourself?
So every single person is different and everybody has their own ways. So what I do is I normally give a toolbox or a tool belt, so to speak, and then
Mhm,
you can utilize what works best for you. But one of the greatest ways, and I know that you do this, Farah, is journaling,
mhm.
just spending time with yourself. We get so busy with our lives, and most of us are overachievers, and we don't give ourselves time.
Yeah.
I know, and we don't give ourselves time to really feel what's going on. And so if you never give yourself that time, how do you ever expect to work through it? And so just taking 5 or 10 minutes in the morning or evening and journaling how you're feeling, giving yourself a bath every once in a while, taking some time for yourself, maybe lighting some candles, spending some time with you, and just maybe asking yourself, hey, like, what's it like in there right now?
Mhm.
How are you feeling about what happened this last weekend? And you'll be amazed at just acknowledging your emotions, honoring them, and not beating yourself up and trying to shove them away, how quickly they'll actually release, and then you can move on. And it's a much gentler way than, getting upset and trying to shove it all down.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to the overachiever part. I had to institute a morning program that allowed me to journal which means I get up at 4:35 in the morning, by the way. I'm not a morning person. I'm a night owl, but I had to just change my schedule to be able to have that time just because between everything, there's the time gets away from me during the day.
That's so
Um
impressive.
yeah, let's see if I keep it up. It's been a couple of years actually. I think I started during COVID. Um, so now I'm gonna move on a little bit, and I want this next question, sorry, to focus a little bit on you, and just say, how do you think changing changing the way you dealt with food and your body and emotions and all that, how did it move both your business and your spirit forward?
Mm, that's a big one. I love that question. I think that it's funny because every single day I wake up and I have to look in the mirror and I have to ask myself, who do I want to be today? And how
Mm,
do I want to show up? And, I could go back to that girl that had 75 extra pounds, and she was a great person. She had a huge heart, and she was a beautiful person. It's not like it's not like I wanted to be overweight. I just
Mhm.
was. But, I look at that and I was always exhausted. I was always sluggish. I had no energy. And, my husband and I, he was my boyfriend back then,
Mhm.
but we loved to take road trips. And so we loved to go to different national parks in California. So we went to like Big Bear, Yosemite, all
Mhm.
these different things. And I can't tell you how many times we would pull up to a viewpoint, like at Yosemite, for instance, and I'd be so tired that I wouldn't even get out of the car to walk over to look at the viewpoint. And that's no way to live. And I don't
Mhm.
ever want to live like that. I don't want to be 80 years old in my rocking chair and look back and go, wow, I never really went for it. I want to get out of that car and I want to walk to the viewpoint and I want to see something so beautiful that my knees
Mhm.
go weak. I
Mhm.
want to, live my life to the fullest. I want to run around with my little cousins when I'm in town for Thanksgiving. I want to do all the things. And I also want to enjoy the food. I want to do all the things. There's a balance to everything. And my body is my spacesuit. My body is the way that I can move through the world. I always tell my clients weight loss is a spiritual game. You know, Me and a lot of my clients, we have been dealing with this for over 5 years. And when you have a struggle that you've been dealing with for 5 years or more, you have to evolve in order to reach a permanent solution. And that evolvement is required. So, there's blocks, like there's worldly blocks that keep your spirit from shining through. And one of those blocks is food, which is using food to block out your emotions. And so once I moved through this and I healed this, I was able to let my soul shine through. And I truly believe that when I walk into a room, I walk in as my authentic self. I walk in and I say, I'm ready. Let's go. I'm at 110%. Let's do this. I have all the energy. I have all of the ambition and I am truly me and I'm able to be the woman that I was always meant to be. And so for me, maintaining a healthy weight, it's an absolute must. It's not even a question because I have to be here. I've only got one life and it's so important that I show up for it, in the biggest and most fulfilling way.
Yeah, I love what you just said, and two things jumped out at me. So I'm gonna ask you to dive in a little bit deeper into them. Um, the first one was your reasons for doing it, right? You gave all these beautiful reasons. I want to, run with my cousin. I want to do this. I want to do that. But every one of those reasons was rooted in yourself and not in others, right? Because I don't know about this, but when I hear people talk about weight loss, I want to look good in a bathing suit. Well, look good to who, right? To the person on the pool, at the pool, or I want my husband to feel attracted to me again. Again, you can't control how other people think. Like none of a lot of the reasons I hear are not rooted in self. They're rooted in others. So I don't know if you agree with me on that or not, but I think if your reasons aren't about you, then they're not good reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think there are some reasons that you can have. I definitely have some selfless reasons. Like, for my husband, I know he deserves a beautiful and vibrant and energetic wife. And so there are little things like that, but you're very correct. The core of it is, y- y- I'm doing this for myself, or I did this for myself, and you have to want this for you. Nobody can want it for you. I can't want it more than you do. You have to want it and you have to have enough reasons on why you want to show up in the world and what you want to do. And the biggest way that you can do that is, what is your purpose? Why are you here and how can you show up better? Because you don't have this thing lingering over you called food that is in your way anymore.
Yeah.
And so I would completely agree with you. You have to have a strong enough why, and it has to be for you. I think I've talked about this. I talk about this all the time. When you're, the first place that the heart flows blood to is itself.
Yeah.
And it's a very big lesson that we can all learn from because it goes back to being in the plane and putting the mask on yourself before you can help others. Once you take care of yourself and you take care of your basic biological needs, you'll have the energy and the heart to show up for everyone else. But
True.
until then, we can't win wanting to please others. We have to truly be in it for ourselves, and it's okay.
That's beautiful. Now, the second thing that I heard you say is you talked about, I could go back to being that girl that was 75 pounds, and she was great. She had a great heart. And I think there's a level of acceptance and forgiveness there that's essential to doing healthy weight loss, right? Because I hear a lot of people like they see old pictures of themselves and they rip them up, or they don't delete that, or they crop themselves. And I'm like, that's part of your story. And I think until you get to that point of you can still love yourself even when you were overweight. And don't get me wrong, like when I look at old pictures, I'm like, ooh, still. But I think an essential part. I don't know if you agree with that or not. And feel free to disagree, but that's just one thing that
I
I heard.
I completely agree, and I think we're just on such a similar page, and so I'm actually agreeing, and this conversation has flowed so easily because we definitely, I agree with what you're saying 100%. I think that I look back at my pictures when I was younger, and I used to do the same thing. I used to cringe, but now I look back and I think that was a part of my journey. And look, I'm on this Ferris wheel, and how cool is that? And I love that girl, and I also feel sorry for her. I feel
Mm.
sorry because I know that she didn't know better. I mean, how could you be mad at yourself when you didn't know any better? You're
Mhm.
always doing the best you can with the best you have, and your best is always enough. And so, a weight loss journey could also be called a self love journey
Yeah,
because the minute that you look in the mirror and you say, hey, you know what? I like you. You're awesome. You've been doing so well. And I'm going to take care of you from now on. That's a promise I made myself. And I had a small stint where my stomach was sick. And whenever I would struggle, I would just put my hand on that place and I'd say, I'm going to take care of you from now on. And it
yeah,
really, a weight loss journey starts with self love. And so you're absolutely right. You have to be willing to love yourself as you are and just say, we're going to do better now.
yeah,
This weight doesn't serve me anymore, but it doesn't mean that you're bad or that you're, not good enough or ugly or anything like that. No, you're a beautiful soul. And now we're just going to level up.
yeah. That's weird. That's one of the reasons I was attracted to you, honestly, as a coach, just because you understood that aspect of it so deeply. So thank you for sharing that. Now you get to enjoy my evergreen question, which is something I try to talk I try to talk to a lot of people about, or I try to ask everybody. And it is, what is a weird habit or ritual you have that makes your life more joyful?
I love that. So I have a couple, but one of them is every single night before I go to sleep, I say, thank you so much. And I think of a couple of things that I'm grateful for. And I do that every single night before I go to sleep, no matter where I am, no matter if I've had a glass of wine, if it's late, it doesn't matter. And then when I wake up in the morning, I say, hey, it's your day, God. Do with it what you will. Use me as you will. I'm here to serve.
Oh,
And those two little things just to help lead me through my day.
wow. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It was a pleasure having you. I could talk to you for hours. I probably will be talking to you a lot more anyways. But for those of you out there, if you want to hear more from Julia, you can check out her website, www.pwlacademy.com, where she just launched her Permanent Weight Loss Academy, an online course helping women to achieve permanent weight loss. You can also catch her on Instagram or Facebook at I am Julia Brooks. All links in the show notes below. As always, I'd love to hear from you about this episode. What do you struggle with the most when it comes to food and body? Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Farrah Haidar. Also, I'm giving away a PDF of some of the best quotes we've had on the show, beautifully designed to print and journal your thoughts. email me at farrah@farrahhaidar.com and title it Quotes. Talk to you soon. Till then, chase your happy.